Welcome to the Relationship Series podcast. My name is Ankush Jain, and each episode I'll be speaking to a different state of mind expert on the subject of relationships. Enjoy. This week I'm joined by Cathy Casey. Cathy is someone I met 2 years ago in London, and she was delivering a seminar over 3 days. And Cathy's had a really interesting background working in a variety of institutions with a variety of people. I've known her most notably for working in criminal justice, but I won't say too much about that, and I'll let her do the talking. So welcome, Cathy.
Glad to be here.
So I guess just to start off with, because I know you've had such a wide variety of experiences working with people and helping them to have better relationships, could you just give us a kind of a whiz tour of your experiences and
Sure.
And what kind of people you've worked with and what kind of situations you've come up against?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And I love the topic, relationships, because actually we're always in relationship all the time. So it's one of my favorite topics. Well, yeah, my background is very, very broad, meaning I've been in many, many different kinds of environments, working in very many different contexts of different topics, but obviously from the context of the principles. But anyway, I first started in the criminal justice system and quickly moved into government programs. You know, we have county government here, so I started working with managers and people who were in different departments in a government setting. And so then it expanded into the corporate world. So I spent a number of years working in various corporations. And then, you know, now I'm up to my ears in working in a hospital setting. I'm in the midst of a project right now, working with nurses and doctors around relationships with each other, and of course with their patients, and then everything in between. I've just had the pleasure of working in many, many different environments, religious groups, educational programs, schools, pretty much just about everything. But my biggest passion right now is and will always be teaching this in the criminal justice system. That is the area that I just will continue to do till they have to wheel me in a wheelchair. But yeah, I've worked with many different kinds of folks. Of course, in the UK, this is where Ankush and I met. I was doing a trainer program there with Jamie Smart, and of course to Kun conferences I've been able to speak a number of times. So I'm now going worldwide. I've been to Jerusalem and Belgium and all these different countries. So I never realized or imagined that this would take me on such a journey. But again, I'm honored and privileged to be on this call. So that's me.
Thanks, Cathy. I know that you've had some amazing transformational stories, or you've been involved in some of those in the criminal justice sector, and probably with people that most of us would think are difficult. Is maybe a nice way to put it. Difficult to deal with, and we probably find it hard enough to improve our much easier relationships. Perhaps could you give us some insights that you've had, or something from your experiences of working with those people, and perhaps share some of the examples of some of the transformations that have happened with people?
Interesting. Okay. Well, for me, this is where I probably first got a real good experience of knowing what true relationship is. Meaning, like you said, when I first came in, people are not in a really happy place. They're sitting in jail, especially the unit I'm in now. They're looking at very long sentences, 25 to life. They've been in the gang life, for most of them, for their entire lives. And so when somebody like me comes in, they kind of look at me like, you've got to be kidding. You know what I mean? Like, what am I going to do? I'm sitting here and this woman's going to be talking to me. So it at the beginning, yes, there's a barrier there. But what's different for me and what I learned real early in the game, and I learned it from a dear mentor of mine, Beverly Hayes, the first thing that you want to realize is that each and every human being, regardless of where their life is, has their core of well-being, their core of wisdom. And again, having nothing to do with what they've done in their life, regardless of that, inside everybody is this core of what I would call pure wisdom, clarity of mind, common sense, whatever you want to call that. So when I go into a group of inmates or kids in juvenile hall, that's what I have eyes for. And it's not something I do, it's an understanding I have at a very deep level, that when I'm with human beings, this is what I have eyes for. So people pick up on that. And to me, that's the key of any relationship. When you have a respect and a certainty that no matter how screwed up we all get, and believe me, we all get out there, we still have that within us. And again, it's a quality of thought that is pure, limitless, timeless. It's our soul. And to me, when we really get that, then people pick up on that, and it helps them relax. It helps them feel okay with you. And so that's where I got to really see the power of that, is when I come in with that kind of sense about myself. And they tell me straight out, Cathy, you're different. And me and my colleagues who went into the jail to do this work, you guys are different. And I said, well, what do you mean? Well, you don't see us as broken. So to me, that's the key. And when I say the power of that, I mean I've had experiences with some inmates who have been in the life for so long, they had given up on themselves. They were so, I would say, in such a low level of consciousness, or such a low level of, just a low level in terms of they forgot they even had a soul. And as far as they were concerned, they had given up on themselves. And from that, of course, people do horrible things. And so one gentleman in particular, I don't know why he was locked up, but he was in such a low state. He had tattoos not only on him, because I'm used to that, but his entire face was covered in tattoos. I mean, I couldn't even see him. There were so many tattoos on his face. It kind of threw me. So I every time I look at him, and he was a young guy. He was only like 20. And over time, every week I'd go in and do my class, and this young man was in my class. Over time, it was really weird because I started to see him. I didn't see the tattoos anymore, even though they were still there. It was like he was in that feeling relaxed and starting to be okay. I could sense it. And then one day I had a guest speaker come in. Stacy Levine came in to the jail with me. She had come into town and came in as a guest. And she asked my group, she said, I'd like to hear how you've learned the principles, or what have you learned about state of mind or anything around that. And this gentleman, the one with the tattoos, he said, well, I'd like to share what's happened to me. And so, of course, we listened to him share his story. And what it was, he said when he was about 10, 11, 12, his father and uncle were in the business of, making and distributing methamphetamine. They were in the gang life. And during that time, of course, they included this young man to be a part of it. During those 3 years, they physically and sexually abused him horribly for 3 years, his father and his uncle. And as a result of that, you can imagine, then it didn't surprise me he had tattoos over his face. He's hiding from the world. And he was so traumatized by that, they had him on all kinds of medication, and he could barely hang in there. He was just in such bad shape. Well, as he was in my class, he somehow realized that through his thinking, he was re-experiencing what they did to him for so long since it happened. he said, you know what? I'm not going to let them do it to me anymore. I've stopped letting them do it to me anymore. And he said, Cathy taught me about what thought can do to us. And I realized that even though that was over, I was keeping it alive through my thinking. And man, I just about fell out of my chair because, see, what he saw was the trauma that he was in was because he kept it alive, constantly through his thinking, and which allowed the whole thing to keep happening and happening. So to me, that's the power of me seeing his wisdom, seeing that he had this capacity to heal himself, literally heal himself. And he was a different guy. So the meds came way down. They started taking him off because he was on antipsychotic medication. And they kept him on a slow, a mild dosage because he was still, still had the residual effect, but he looked like a different person. So Stacy, who was with me, when we walked out of that class, when we walked out of the facility, she looked at me. Her eyes were like saucers. I said, this is what happens. This is what happens when people wake up to the fact that they are a thinking being and that whatever is going on in there is what that's what they're going to get. And he realized it. He put it together. And that made such a difference for him. He started to, have, the nightmares started to go away and PTSD, that whole being in the trauma over and over again started to dissipate. Now, again, it really happened to him, and it was horrible. I can't even imagine how I would handle that. But he started to come out of himself and started to feel okay. And the guys who were there listening, they were so supportive of him. That was the other area. I was a little nervous about him sharing this with a group of men, and they were cool. They were like, hey, man, we're here for you. You go ahead and you tell what you need to tell, and we're here for you. We're supporting you. So that was pretty amazing. I mean, these are gang guys. These are tough, they wouldn't show any feelings. And this whole thing happened in this one particular session. Again, this is the power of waking up to really understanding where your experience comes from in general, and then you see it within your own life. So that's one of the main stories that had such an impact on me. I'll never forget it. I will never forget it. Very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really powerful. And as I was sitting here, I was thinking...
Yes.
So this is obviously a very troubled individual and had some quite difficult life circumstances. For the majority of people that I'm guessing will be listening to this won't have those life circumstances. And I was just sitting here thinking, well,
sure.
How does this apply to their lives? What can we take away from it? And actually, I found that there were probably a number of things that could apply in terms of approaching people without thinking there's something wrong with them. And I'm sure if we're all honest about it, we've all done that with people in our lives. And I know I have.
Of course. Yes, absolutely. See, this is an innocent thing we do. It's being human. There are people in our lives that we tend to have a lot of judgmental thinking, or people in our lives that we feel this heaviness, this burden. And I know in families, there's always somebody in a family that everybody struggles with, and maybe legitimately because this person is not living responsibly, or they're dealing with an issue that they keep failing over and over again. And I know when I teach groups of people, I'll ask how many in the group have somebody in their life that this is an issue for them, and everybody will raise their hand. Everybody. And as you said, we all have at times judgmental thinking. And I experienced this for myself when I'm the oldest of 10, so I'm from a very large family. And one of my brothers He was the one that never got his act together. He would be out using drugs. He'd be out doing Lord knows what. And the whole family had tried to help him, and he had burned every bridge of every sibling in the entire family. Meaning everybody tried to help, and he would just continue doing whatever he did. So anytime his name would come up, you could just see people rolling their eyes or kind of like, we're done with him. But underneath that, there was this fear that he was going to end up dead. I mean, you could feel it. Every time his name would come up, there would be this sense of dread, guilt, whatever, about what's going to happen. And people are just kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Well, I noticed the times that he would call me, I would do kind of the kind of like the Spanish Inquisition. I would ask him all these questions. So, are you working, or do you have a place to live? You know, I kind of, with good intention, wanted to see if he was okay. But I kept, imposing on him, trying to, get him to realize that he needs to get his act together. Well, then I wondered why he never called me or my siblings that much, because, we would continually try to help him and he would just ignore us. Well, it suddenly dawned on me, no wonder he doesn't call me, because how would I feel if I called somebody and they just kept questioning me on, well, did I get my act together? I saw it. I realized I needed to change, not him. So the next time he called me, I didn't do that anymore. I just said, I was glad to hear from him, and pretty much enjoyed listening to whatever he wanted to say. I did not do the Spanish Inquisition, and we ended the call, and it was great. It was just great to hear from him. Well, he called me again, a few weeks later, and we chatted. Didn't do it. I didn't ask what he was doing, how he was doing. And finally, about a month later, he calls me up and he says, "Sis, I'm not doing very well, and I need your help. I'm really messed up right now, and I don't know what to do. Can you help me?" Now, that would have never happened if I kept coming at him. What changed for me is I saw that even though things weren't working out for him, I saw that he had that core of wisdom and well-being, and I stopped having that judgmental thinking about him. I just stopped it. And from that, so I had him come stay with me for a few months, got him to a good psychiatrist, got him on good medication, because his diagnosis was he was very bipolar. And of course, when you have that diagnosis, you tend to use drugs and all of that good stuff. So got him with a good psychiatrist, but the next day I happened to be doing a training, and he asked, "Listen, I want to go to your training thing." And I said, "Well, maybe you should go to somebody else because I'm your sister." He said, No, I want to go to yours. So he sat in a 3-day training about state of mind and all that good stuff. So between the medication and his understanding about the nature of thought and how he had auditory hallucinations, meaning he heard voices, especially if he started using drugs. When he started to understand that and knew what was up, and of course the medication helped him, after about a year, not only did he finally come off his meds, he got a great job, and this is about, I'd say, 7 years ago. Got a great job, and to this day is still in that job, living a stable life, living in a great place. He lives in Monterey, California, has a great girlfriend, and his life is totally different. And it's cute. Every time we visit each other, he always brings me flowers, and we both well up in tears because we made that connection. And nobody else in the family really understands that. They're just so relieved he's okay. But he and I have that connection because I had to change. I'm the one who had to see him in a whole different way to allow him to feel safe enough to come to me. And so, to me, anybody who has a relationship in their life, the first thing you have to realize is, yes, it can be exasperating. Yes, it can be frustrating. Yes, it can be, you've done everything you can, if you have. But what you have to see is, where are you in your mind when you're with that person? If you're carrying all that heavy thinking about them, that's what's getting in the way of you trying to have any connection or any impact. So your presence, just your presence and being with that person is enough. You don't have to do anything. But if you could realize when you're with that person that your mind is really stirred up about them, if you could just see that. Now, if you're in that, it's okay. You don't want to try to not have that, because what happens when we try to do that? It's not going to work. Just see you in it. See your personal thinking in it. And from that, see, that's where our learning curve comes in. See, I had to see something new about my relationship with my brother. It was on me. And when I woke up to it, that changed the whole dynamic. So potentially, if you feel like there's no hope and there's nothing you can do, well, yes, you can give any person, any human being, your presence. And you know what that really is? It's unconditional love. That's all presence is you're just in the moment with a human being, and you have no personal thinking, no judgment. You're just appreciating that they're lost, that they're totally lost in their own thinking. But underneath all of that is this core that they will never lose, just like the inmates that I teach. They will never lose that part of themselves. And it's good to know this for ourselves too, because we can get out there. And you're right, I'm working with people with extreme situations. But let me tell you, I can lose it. I can go down. I can feel frustrated. I can feel, kind of a lot of anxiety or anticipation about not knowing what's going to happen next. I can be in that myself. So we have to have compassion for ourselves, that sometimes we're just in it. And the more we appreciate that underneath, even when we get insecure or upset, that we have that core of well-being or wisdom or whatever you want to call that. So the more I see it for me, I can see it now in my brother and other people who are really suffering more extremely. But this is all of us, just in our everyday lives, just getting along with people. The more we see our part in it, that whatever thinking I'm in, that's the experience I'm going to get of another human being. So I don't experience people from them. I experience people through my thinking of them. And when we realize that, wow, that changes the whole ballgame.
Yeah, I love that. And it's made me think about a number of my relationships that I've had over the years and currently have, and how many times I've unwittingly and unknowingly thought, well, they need to be different for me to have a better relationship with them. Yes.
Very common. If he would only, in marriages, I was in a marriage, a long-term marriage, and it was the same thing. It's like, well, if my husband would treat me a certain way or say certain things, then I would be okay. Or it would prove that he loved me or whatever. It was, my well-being was contingent on how others saw me or how others were with me. And man, that is not a good way to build a relationship. Because ultimately nobody's ever going to meet all those needs. See, that's in me already. See, my being okay, confident, having a sense of well-being, that exists within me regardless of anybody else. And see, we just allow it to come out when we're with people, especially when we first fall in love. We drop all of our personal thinking and we're just totally in the moment with people. And then we assign that feeling to the person we're with. When actually that came from me, it didn't come from them. And then we set it up. Well, I'll feel good just the way I'm feeling now when I first fall in love forever, because this is the person that I love and all that great stuff. Well, as time moves on, it's the same person, The only thing that's really changed is my thinking about them. And over time, that feeling and love feeling starts to go away, and then we look at the person and see it as, well, it's because they're taking it away. They're not giving it to me. No, it's I'm over time in all this personal thinking about them, and that's where it's being taken away. And it's still there, but from my thinking, it's still there. That's a tough one to see, but that's the truth of it.
I found it really interesting listening to you talk about your brother, because the thing that popped up for me is that is very helpful in my mind for parents dealing with teenage children.
Oh, yes.
And I was talking about this with someone recently, and they were saying, well, my son or daughter, now they, I call them and they just say, leave me alone, Mom, etc., etc. And so what they were doing was, they were stuck. What do I do? How am I supposed to connect with them? And what I loved hearing from your story was, just listening and not trying to fix them, or not trying to change them, or not trying to make sure they're okay.
Yeah.
And I know
that's a tough one.
And just connecting.
When you're a parent, of course I'm a parent, I have a son, that's another 10 stories where I got to learn what I'm talking about. But I remember I was teaching a group of engineers, it was a leadership program, and these are very bright engineers, and we were talking about the state of mind and all that good stuff. And well, they started to ask about their kids, and most of them were teenagers, and how these guys were really frustrated because they wanted their kids to be successful, and a lot of the kids weren't measuring up and all that good stuff. So they said, could you talk about that? So we started talking about this idea, and it just struck me. There were about 45 of them. So I looked out and I said, now how many of you guys, your worst fear for your teenage sons or daughters, your worst fear is they're going to end up living under the bridge. That they're going to fail and end up living under the bridge. And my colleagues are looking at me like, why is she asking that question? Well, guess what? 3/4 of the room raised their hands. I said, okay, how many of you have this worst fear that they're going to be living with you forever, that they'll never get out on their own and have an independent life? All the hands go up. And then I said, how many of you are afraid your children may end up dead, that you're sitting on that fear? And all the hands go up. So then I looked at them and I said, so you're coming at them sitting in all of that thinking, and you wonder why they want to run out, go the opposite direction. See, that really hit them. I said, when you're walking around with all of that, with good intention, I'm being a good parent. I want to make sure my kids are safe, that they're going to be okay, they're going to be independent, they're going to make it in life. Well, when you're coming at them and all the worry, when you're coming at them with this in your mind, they feel it. They absolutely feel it. And again, you're a parent, you want the best for your people. But what you have to see is that's not helping them or you. That's going to make them be any more successful by you carrying this weight and thinking, well, this is how I love my children, by having all this worry and concern. So I had to realize that myself with my own son. And again, it's the same as with my brother. I had to see, I'm in all this heavy thinking with good intention, and I'm not going to be able to make any connection. So I got to see that with my son, and from that, I was able to then engage in dialogue with him. And when I didn't have all that extra thinking, we had a much closer relationship. And I had to trust that he had his own wisdom, that he was going to work it out. And 9 times out of 10, he didn't really need me to get in there and help him fix it. It's not to say if he asked for help, I wouldn't give it to him. But if I really hung in there with him, he figured it out. So yeah, this is a big one for parents, and it's really tough because we have so much on our kids, meaning We have a lot of thinking about wanting them to be okay, wanting them to be safe. And we're innocently, as parents, that's what's getting in the way of making that connection. And it's a tough one to realize, believe me. That's where, and if you were going to ask me in terms of relationship, what is the toughest thing for me, what has been the toughest thing, it's been in a role of being a parent and realizing that me in that equation, me, Cathy, personal, that was the issue. That was a tough one for me to see. So I'm glad you brought that up. I'm sure a lot of people can appreciate that one.
What I'm hearing is that there are no exceptions to this.
Nope.
We've talked about inmates. We've talked about siblings. We've talked about children. You deal with professional people.
Big time.
And I'm guessing it's all the same. It works the same way every time.
It's all the same. See, that's what allows me to work in all these different environments, because what I see are human beings who are, again, different cultures, different environments, but underneath it all, we all operate the same way. Underneath it all, we're all the same. And it's pointing people to how the system works. I just kind of point them in that direction. This is how things are happening for you. This is where it comes from. I don't tell them how to be, because I know they have the wisdom to realize that for themselves. I just point them in the direction of what's behind it all, just how it works, the blueprint. And then once they realize, oh, that's what it is, then they work things out for themselves. And if I don't do that, if I understand it for myself, then when I'm with people in many different environments, I just see the fact of what's going on, so I don't get impacted. I just see the innocence and when people are being a certain way, meaning what they're doing isn't innocent, but because of lack of understanding, that's where the innocence is. So yeah, this goes across everything.
Yeah, it just reminded me of the saying that people are doing the best with what they've got.
Yes. Given their level of understanding. So if you're at a certain level of understanding, then it makes sense to go rob the bank. And I had a guy who, he came in and he said, I shouldn't be in here. And I said, well, why do you think you shouldn't be in here? Well, because they didn't see me do it. I said, do what? Well, I robbed the bank. I said, so you robbed the bank, but you shouldn't be in here because they didn't see you rob the bank? See, I'm like, that didn't make sense to me. Even the other inmates are like, whoa, we got a live one in here. And down the line, about a month later, he woke up and he said, oh, my heavens. And I said, well, why did you rob the bank? He said, well, I need to pay my bills. He was a business guy. He wasn't even he didn't have any history of being, doing anything like that. But given his level of understanding, it made sense. I've got to rob the bank to get money to pay my bills. Anyway.
Well, thanks for that, Cathy. We've pretty much run out of time. So
great, perfect.
It's flown by, and I've loved the conversation today. For people that want to get a hold of you, if they want to carry on this conversation or find out more about you, what's the best way for them to do that?
That would be email. That would be my email address. I don't know if you want me to give it now or... Okay, my email address are the letters UARE100 at AOL.com.
UARE100 at AOL.com.
That's correct.
Fantastic. And for people that want to find out more about myself or listen to the other podcasts, they can do that via Facebook, which is facebook.com/Ankush Jain Ltd. They can do it via my website, which is www.ankushjain.co.uk, or they can do it via Twitter, which is @AnkushKJain. This was the Relationship Series podcast. If you like this episode, please share it and leave us your feedback online. Thanks for listening.